God, and it's trust not in humanity, trust not in thy neighbor. Now that doesn't mean like be paranoid of people. We're to love people, but this is how Jesus was able to discern his, by behavioral patterns and the way people operate. Because I believe people are in Egypt confused until they do know Christ. Like me, I look back at hindsight 2020. I look back at my life and think, wow, I didn't even know what I was doing. That's that verse. I was lost, but now I'm found. I didn't. I look back at some of my pictures, my old life, the immaturity of choices and relationships that I maintained. Because they say, flee your youthful lust. Some of the greatest prophets were sinners who say we haven't sinned or there's no sin in us. It would be a lie. You know, we're born into sin, our flesh. And remember, you're of your father, the devil, the flesh. The lust of your flesh you will fulfill. So by conformity sometimes, you can be under the power of the world, like under the power of evil. That's not hatred to say what biblical doctrine says. It says many won't endure sound doctrine. You know, I get rightfully angered, righteous anger. The Lord was angry with the wicked every day. A wicked person was simply a sinner because they live in darkness. They operate, the narrative of their life is, their behavior is, there's incarnal sin, which is behavioral, emotional, and mental depravity. And then that will take you into the strongholds, physical sin, because you want the temporal gratifications. I don't feel loved. I have abandonment issues. I have unforgiveness. I'm resentful. I have envy. These are the, things that make yourself a malefactor of your own progress. So surrendering, like saying, you know what, I forgive people that hurt me, not for them, for myself. Because I think about what state of existence they were in to be able to carry themselves out in that demeanor. They didn't know what they were doing, for they know not what they do, Father. And that's what the Lord refers to. If people don't know what they're doing, when they're acting out of their emotions, desires of a man heart. So if your heart's hardened, or if you have trauma, pain, resentment, envy, jealousy, your mind's not operating fully. So the Lord says He gives you a sound mind. Your mind's not operating at its full capacity when you have oppression going on in your vessel, emotionally, mentally, and then physically. That's why the Lord had showed me the enemy feeds off your trauma, your pain. That's when you remember Satan masquerades as an angel of light. People masquerade to get their needs met, and they don't think about the people they're hurting because they don't even realize they're hurting themselves. They don't even realize that they're a weapon formed against themselves. They're their own worst enemy. And you could see this in the delusional minds or reprobate minds mean they do what's not convenient for themselves. Can you imagine what rebellion does to a person's narrative of their life and relationship? And they can't understand why they're not getting better or they're not being loved appropriately because they're unloving to themselves. It's not mean or hateful. I'm just saying, like, you reap what you sow, right? If you're sowing discord, you're living in chaos. And you know who's going to yoke with you? Someone who does the same. Because someone who's serving the Prince of Peace or wanting to obtain peace in their life is not going to be able to not be unequally yoked to somebody who lives in constant rebellion, confusion, and chaos. And that comes with sin. That's why I always say, what some people can mean for evil, the Lord can mean for good. Like He said, I'm going to refine you as gold. Don't think something strange is occurring in mysterious trial comes on you. He always tells me not to get angered by people because what are you going to do with that emotion? When someone's behavior can provoke you, come under the power of no man, what are you going to do with the anger? Because they're not in state of existence to even understand that they're upsetting you. They're operating in rebellion, and that's a sin of divination or witchcraft. So what are you going to get angered about? Because they don't have the ability to care how you feel. They don't care how they feel. Just imagine the resentment and animosity that's operating in one vessel where they can't sustain themselves in peace. And that's why I tell you, every soul is accountable for their own iniquity. Examine and judge yourself. You're not going to be asked about my sins. That's why I tell people, when you're bringing up my past, I'm like, why are you asking me this stuff? Because there's a monitoring spirit. I call it, I speak as a spiritual person. People monitor your progress or lack thereof because they have envy and jealousy. Wait, she thinks she's going to do better than me? That's not going to happen. I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to create an obstruction, or like they say, the pits they form, they fall into them. Because when you're operating in deceit or malice, You're reaping what you sow. You're sowing that, and it eventually shows in your life. Everything dark comes into the light. That's not hatred. That's just behavior. There's nothing new under the sun. I get mocked at. Oh, hey, Jesus, that's making you crazy. I'm like, no, what's crazy is me sitting on everybody's deathbed because they can't stop sinning. They can't stop smoking. They can't stop drinking. They can't stop ruining their own relationship. They can't stop gossiping. They can't quit slandering each other and destroying each other with their words and their deeds. That's bizarre behavior to me. It's not. It's unnatural. You're a weapon formed against yourself. That's what I say. And since I've come to this cross, now I'm able to understand why people sit where they sit because of the trauma, the pain, bearing the sins of their forefathers. If you come from a dysfunctional family, you're going to operate in that same dysfunction. You can't tell your child to go walk in greatness if you've never showed them how. Children become what's poured into them. That's why that verse says, train a child the way he should go and he'll never fall away from it. That's the falling away. What are you falling away to? Some children have fallen away the moment they're born in this world because they've never been shown anything correct. They haven't given the doors of opportunity because they were born into dysfunction or oppression, victim of circumstance, product of their environment. And so that, because of their desperation of wanting out of that, because the adolescence or innocence in them is being robbed, and they can feel it. They feel it. And instead of coming out from among it, they can complain or complacent with it and start developing the same traits, behaviors, have the same patterns of life, marry the same kind of people, have the same kind of family bondage, because they don't know how to do anything else. They're stuck in a pattern. So, I don't care, I always say this, I don't care who laughs at me, I don't care who mocks at me. I've never been so set free in my life. And my hopes and desires and dreams have changed since I came to the cross. I don't want the world because I know the world, like the Lord showed me, brings you confusion and chaos. I don't want to be enslaved to materialism or bad relationships or sin or I don't want I minimalize my life, not monetize it. Some of the best things in life are free, like just your peace, your joy, sitting by a water, doing nothing, not having to do anything, not always have to be running to and fro. When I was coming to this cross, I felt like I was being tossed back and forth from dark forces, and in all reality, I kind of was. When you're trying to come to the cross and follow the Lord, you're going to start noticing the confusion that's around you. You're going to start noticing the red flags that you once missed. That's not hatred. To start acknowledging the things that are no longer of use to you, that peace in your life. That's not hatred. Only seems hateful to people who can't manipulate or dominate your life, or you're not doing the things they want or need to do. Like I've had people from my past, I'll look back and not saying anything bad, I'm not going to bring up no names, but they're still doing the same thing and asking me the same question. Why isn't my life getting better? Why am I getting along in my relationship? Why is my marriage still failing? When they're still sitting at the same community taverns and wondering why their marriage is failing. Everything in the dark comes in the light. It's showing in your life. You can't either love your family or your marriage or you love sin. There's no partiality. There's no in between. That's well-being. How can you justify that? I've watched so many people die from sin. And they want to tell me, oh, that Jesus stuff just doesn't crazy. You know why? Because your spirit of truth irritates your demons are being in your vessel